History remembers the headlines. We find the bylines. This is the unsung. When you think of pirates, who comes to mind? Blackbeard? Captain Kidd? Maybe even the fictional Jack Sparrow? Our imagination is filled with these romanticized outlaws of the Caribbean, their flags snapping in the Atlantic breeze. But what if I told you the single most successful and powerful pirate in history was in a man, wasn't European, and never sailed the Caribbean? Her name was Ching Shih, and in the early 1800s, this former prostitute from Guangdong commanded a maritime empire that dwarfed anything the Caribbean pirates ever dreamed of. At its height, her red flag fleet consisted of over 400 ships and a staggering 80,000 pirates, dominating the South China Sea. She didn't just raid ships. She defeated the Qing dynasty's navy time and again, outsmarted the Portuguese, and forced the mighty British Empire to treat her as an equal. Yet, her name is virtually absent from most Western history books. So how was a woman in her position, a pirate admiral who humiliated empires, so completely erased from the popular narrative? To understand her story, we have to travel back to 1775. Ching Shih was born into crushing poverty in Guangdong province. Sold into prostitution as a young girl, she spent her early years in a floating brothel, a life with no future. But her fate took a dramatic turn in 1801 when she caught the eye of Zheng Yi, a notoriously powerful pirate commander. The accounts differ. Some say he captured her, others that he proposed. What's certain is that she didn't just become his wife, she became his partner. She negotiated her marriage, securing a share of his power and control over his pirate confederation. For 6 years, they ruled the seas together. Then, in 1807, Zheng Yi died unexpectedly. In that patriarchal era, a widow was expected to fade into obscurity. Ching Shih refused. Instead of accepting a life of quiet widowhood, she seized the moment with breathtaking audacity. She moved quickly to consolidate power, forming a strategic and personal alliance with her late husband's adopted son and second-in-command, Zhang Bao. With his loyalty secured, she took undisputed control of the entire fleet. She didn't just inherit a pirate confederation, she transformed it. Ching Shih's true genius, her pivotal contribution, was her ability to organize chaos into an empire. Before her, pirates were little more than lawless, disorganized raiders. She changed that with a strict, revolutionary code of conduct that forged her sprawling fleet into a disciplined, cohesive navy. The rules were simple, but the enforcement was absolute. First, there was no more indiscriminate raiding. Any village that paid protection fees to the fleet was to be left completely untouched. This wasn't just about honor, it was a sophisticated business model, creating a stable, predictable income stream. Second, she introduced a law that was unheard of in the brutal world of piracy. Female captives were to be treated with respect. Rape was punishable by death, without exception. This rule not only reflects a sense of justice, but was also a pragmatic measure to maintain order and discipline among tens of thousands of hardened men. Third, she established a transparent and fair system for distributing treasure. All loot had to be registered with a central purser before it could be divided. 20% went into a public fund for the fleet, for repairs, supplies, and other collective needs. The remaining 80% was distributed to the crew of the capturing ship. This system incentivized success while ensuring the entire organization remained strong. And finally, loyalty was paramount. Any pirate who deserted his post or disobeyed a direct order was beheaded on the spot. Through this iron-fisted code, she transformed a mob into a military machine. With her fleet organized, Ching Shih launched a series of brilliant military campaigns. The South China Sea became her personal domain. The Qing dynasty, enraged by her audacity, sent their imperial navy to crush her. Time and time again, she defeated them. Her forces were so effective that they not only repelled the government's attacks, but often captured their warships, adding them to her own growing armada. She blockaded major ports like Guangzhou, crippling the emperor's trade and bringing the coastal economy to its knees. She was a master of naval tactics, using her knowledge of the local tides, weather, and coastlines to ambush and outmaneuver larger, more conventional forces. Her dominance attracted the attention of Western powers. Portuguese fleets sailing from Macau and British naval ships tried to intervene, viewing her as a threat to their own colonial ambitions. She fought them off, too, proving that her tactical genius was more than a match for the so-called masters of the sea. At her peak, Ching Shih controlled the vast trade routes stretching from Macau all the way to Vietnam. No ship, whether it was a small merchant junk or a vessel from the East India Company, could pass without paying her taxes. She wasn't just a pirate, she was a sovereign power. So, if Ching Shih was this monumental figure, why don't we know her name? Her erasure from history was a complex, multi-layered process. First, there's a clear geographic bias. Western historiography has always been obsessed with Atlantic piracy, creating a mythology around the Caribbean that completely overshadows the far larger and more sophisticated pirate enterprises in Asian waters. The scale of Ching Shih's operation alone should have made her a central figure in maritime history, but the focus remained squarely on the West. Then came the potent force of gender bias. In the 19th century, when many of these histories were being written, the idea of a powerful female military leader, let alone an Asian one, directly contradicted the Victorian-era stereotype of the passive, submissive Eastern woman. She didn't fit the narrative, so she was ignored. Furthermore, acknowledging her success would have meant admitting colonial embarrassment. The British and Portuguese empires built their prestige on a myth of unwavering naval superiority. Recording the story of a Chinese pirate queen who repeatedly defeated them was simply not an option. It would have been a humiliating admission of weakness. Adding to this is the lack of written records from her own side. Much of Ching Shih's story survives through oral tradition and, crucially, in the frustrated reports of her enemies. She was too busy running an empire to write her own chronicles. Finally, when she was mentioned in Western accounts, she was often stripped of her agency. Her achievements were sometimes folded into the tales of male pirates, or she was fictionalized and reduced to a one-dimensional dragon lady trope, an exotic and dangerous villain rather than the strategic genius she was. After years of undefeated dominance, Ching Shih saw the political tides turning. The Qing government, unable to defeat her, offered amnesty. In 1810, in her ultimate display of power, she didn't just surrender. She negotiated the terms of her retirement from a position of strength. She sailed her entire fleet, flags flying, into Guangzhou to broker the deal herself. Her terms were extraordinary. A full pardon for every single one of her pirates, the right for them to keep all their accumulated wealth, and a government position for her second-in-command and husband, Zhang Bao. The emperor, left with no other choice, agreed to everything. Ching Shih, the pirate queen who had brought an empire to its knees, retired as a wealthy and respected noblewoman. She settled in Guangzhou, where she opened a successful gambling house and died peacefully in her bed at the age of 69, a conclusion almost unheard of for any pirate, let alone the most successful one of all. Her legacy is a masterclass in leadership, strategy, and defying the world's expectations. Ching Shih's story forces us to ask, who else has been erased? Who are the other non-Western leaders whose genius has been overlooked by history? Share their stories in the comments below. And if you want to uncover more hidden histories, subscribe to the Unsung.